happy Tuesday to you all. It's good to see you all. Know that at any point, if you want to add stuff to the chat, if you want to say hi to people that you're seeing on the call, if you want to just connect with just share your thoughts or ideas or resources or anything like that, please add it on the chat. I feel like in so many ways, like when we combine, when all of us are coming and are together, there's so much wisdom that people can bring to the table. So if there are anything that you want to add, you want to let kind of your voice be heard, put it in the chat. You can even unmute yourself and add some things if you wanted to. So it's awesome to see you all. Happy Tuesday. I'm really excited about today's topic. What I want to do real quick, I'm going to put on the chat again my contact info. Like if you want to follow me again on Instagram or Twitter, I'm putting out resources relatively consistently there, additional resources beyond these webinars. And also, if you wanted to reach out to me about supporting your school in the fall or even supporting you personally with what's happening now or in the fall as we hopefully come back to school, then you can email me info@eqschools.com or even just get on my calendar by going to eqschools.com/connect. So awesome seeing you all. Today's topic is near and dear to my heart. And I'll just share that it's one of those skills and concepts that when I'm still getting it more and more down in my system as I grow, but I will say that once I had a basic understanding of it and started to really begin to implement it into my life and and actually feel it, it's transformed me. It's transformed my life and actually truly helped me, uh, especially during difficult times, to face adversity. So I'm just going to pin myself and just share that also today's topic is one of the two main pillars of resilience. If you look at the researcher behind resilience, the two main pillars are social support and then today's topic, which is self-compassion. And to me, frankly, like, I don't know about you all, but like I experienced this time with COVID to be a time where all the emotions are magnified like crazy. Like the amplitude is just going nuts. Like sometimes I feel absolutely okay and fine and safe and great. And like, I'm really grateful for everything. And then other times I'm just like, whew, like just there's a lot of sadness. There's fear. There's, like relational dynamics can become more difficult. There's a lot of stuff happening. And so one of the best ways for me to know how to deal with it is obviously beyond just social support is to really give myself a lot of kindness and compassion. Now, I'm going to root everything that we're going to do today and everything I'm going to tell you in research. Okay. So this concept of self-compassion has been studied by many, many researchers. One of the leading researcher in this field is Kristen Neff, who is basically a professor at the University of Texas. And she even has a website called selfcompassion.org. I'll put it in the chat. I highly recommend you all check it out. I'm borrowing, so what I'm going to share about today, I'm borrowing from a bunch of different researchers, but I would say that her work is primarily the one that's informing a lot of what I'm going to share. And then also, we're not just going to talk about research. Of course, we're also going to get into an exercise that hopefully can really support you, not only now, but you could use it at any time in your life. And hopefully we'll have some time to connect with one another in small groups. So, so what is self-compassion? So self-compassion is actually the same as having compassion towards others, but targeted towards yourself. Now, I know that some of you, I mean, you've all heard the term self-compassion before, but I want to see if I can really define in a very specific way. So to be compassionate, think about it, to be compassionate with someone else, you need to notice that they're suffering. You need to have empathy towards them. You need to show them kindness. And you might even realize as you're being compassionate with them and as you're seeing that this person's suffering, you might even realize that they're just suffering because they're human. There's nothing wrong with them. Everyone suffers from time to time. And when you really study this concept of self-compassion, you notice that there's three aspects to it. And this is a lot of what Kristin Neff talks about. The first is self-kindness versus self-judgment. So self-compassionate people recognize that being imperfect, failing, experiencing adversity is just part of life. So they tend to be a lot more gentle with themselves when they're confronted with painful experiences, rather than, for example, getting angry when these things happen in their life. Byron Katie, who's another one of my favorite, thinkers, she says that when we fight against reality, we lose, but only 100% of the time. And I love that because, it's what's interesting to me is that we not only lose, but we also, it can, when we fight against reality, it increases our stress, our frustration, and we can be a lot more self-critical. Self-compassionate people are able to recognize that we can't always get what we want exactly, and they begin to accept this reality with more kindness, and therefore that helps them be more resilient. Okay, the second piece to self-compassion is what's called common humanity versus isolation. So when we are frustrated or sad or suffering with something, it's very easy for us to feel isolated. It's almost as if, because I'm feeling this right now in the moment, I'm feeling the sadness, I'm the only one in the world who's suffering. Now, now it's very easy to go there, but when we practice self-compassion, it involves recognizing that suffering is just a part of being human. And even right now, if I'm suffering, even in this moment, there are many other people in the world who experience what I'm experiencing, and I'm actually not alone in what I'm experiencing. And the last piece of it is equanimity as opposed to versus over identification. So equanimity versus over identification. And here's what I mean by that. Self-compassion involves observing our negative thoughts and emotions with openness and clarity, so that they are held in mindful awareness. It's almost like we become observers of how difficult emotions feel like in our body and in our mind. It's about, like, as much as possible, embodying a non-judgmental, receptive state of mind in which, like, as observer, like, we observe our thoughts and our feelings as they are without trying to suppress or deny them. We basically begin to see reality as it is, but from a place of almost like kind of like noticing, oh, here's sadness. Like, this is what sadness feels like. Or, whoa, here's what, kind of, I'm getting into this depression loop. Or here's what anxiety feels like. Oh, I'm noticing it in my chest. I'm noticing. And I also know that all these sensations arise and pass away. They arise and pass. Everything is temporary. And so as you remind yourself of that, you're able to have some separation from it, so that you don't become your emotion. You're not completely gripped by your emotion. You see, a lot of times people get into a place where they literally they almost believe that they are that they are their own emotion. And I think one of the most powerful thing about self-compassion is that it gives us a little bit of separation. I am not fear. I am not sadness. I'm not anxiety. It's something that occurs within me, and it's going to pass through. All right. So what self-compassion is not, and I think this is something that happens, a lot of people, there's a lot of misconception around it. Number one, self-compassion is not self-pity, because self-pity is actually very self-centered. Self-pity is like, oh me, woe me, it's always happening to me. It's very, like, narrow focused on myself. Self-compassion is a lot more broad, and takes into account other people's experiences. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence either, and it's certainly not self-esteem or self-worth. Self-esteem is more of a projection of who you think you are and what you think your self-worth is. Self-compassion is a lot more of an active state. It's an active state towards supporting yourself in whatever it is that you're experiencing. It's usually a lot more supportive as well. Self-esteem can often be not supported, like the opposite. So why is self-compassion important? I'm just going to briefly go through some of the benefits that the research shows, and then we're going to get into the how. So self-compassion increases motivation. It boosts happiness. It increases optimism. It improves body image. It enhances self-worth. It fosters resilience, and it reduces mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, and stress. You know, initially when I first heard about self-compassion, I thought that it would be something that that actually makes me not that like I have a lot of I'm not necessarily very, what's the word, I don't put off things too much and projects too much, but sometimes I do. You know, sometimes I procrastinate and stuff. And initially, when I engaged in self-compassion, I thought that it would make me more of a procrastinator. I was worried that it'd be like, oh, like, you know, I'm just focusing on loving myself up and I'm not actually going to ever get to do this thing that I kind of need to do, you know? And I found that it was the opposite. It really supported me in actually loving myself up and then actually going and doing the things that I need to do and being at my best. So, how do we do it? Now, we're going to get into a practice that I think would be, it's very powerful for me, and I imagine that it would be for you as well. That's my hope. And but before we do, I just want to give you a few tips and caveats to keep in mind. And this is really important. And so I want to read you a quote directly from Kristen Neff from her website, selfcompassion.org. And that is, since self-compassion is often a radically new way of relating to ourselves, there are a few tips to practicing self-compassion that are important to keep in mind. This is true for novices, but it's also true for experienced practitioners. So self-compassion is a practice of goodwill, not necessarily good feelings. In other words, even though the friendly, supportive stance of self-compassion is aimed at the alleviation of suffering, and sometimes it does, we can't always control the way things are. If we use self-compassion practice to try to make our pain go away by suppressing it or fighting against it, things will likely just get worse. With self-compassion, we're mindfully accepting that the moment is painful and embrace ourselves with kindness and care in response, remembering that imperfection is part of the shared human experience. You know, some people find that when they practice self-compassion, the pain at first actually gets worse. It's this phenomenon is called backdraft. It comes from it's a firefighting term that describes what happens when a door in a burning house is opened. You know, oxygen goes out and the flames rush out. It's the same as kind of opening the door to our heart. You know, when we're opening the door to our heart through self-compassion, a lot of time pain can arise. Fortunately, we can meet this old pain with the resources of mindfulness and self-compassion, and the heart will naturally begin to heal. You know, so it still means that we need to give ourselves the permission to be slow learners, and especially when it comes to self-compassion. And honestly, if we feel overwhelmed by difficult emotions, sometimes the most self-compassionate response may be to take, you know, to pull back a little bit temporarily, to focus on our breath, the sensations of our feet on the ground, and just engaging in kind of ordinary behaviors of self-care, like having a cup of tea, going on a nice walk, taking a nap, things like that. All right. So with all that context being out there, I think let's get into it. Let's practice. Let's do a quick mindfulness self-compassion practice. Now, what I'm going to ask for you to do right now is to bring to mind something that causes you a little bit of suffering. And I'm actually asking you to not necessarily pick something that is very traumatic, but if you can pick something in your life right now that causes you some suffering, and I mean, let's face it, we all, you know, I could give you many examples from mine, but I think we all experience this, especially during this difficult time. And so it could be in your relationships at home. It could be related to work. It could be maybe in your relationship with people outside of the house. Whatever it is, like, see if you, or maybe it could be health related. I mean, whatever it is, see if you can find one thing in your life that causes you a little bit of suffering, or maybe a good amount, but just not necessarily something traumatic. And if you can, I'd love for you to um, just take a moment and take a deep breath as you're thinking about that with me. And I invite you to get into a mindful body posture. So your back is straight, your feet are on the floor, and your hands are on your lap. Now, in a moment, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Again, if you feel too tired right now, you can keep your eyes half open. And as you close your eyes and take another deep breath in, all I want you to do for a moment is let go of that thing that causes you suffering. Just let go of it for a moment and just notice your feet on the ground. Just notice your feet on the ground. How does it feel like to make contact with the ground right now, knowing that the ground is right there to support us? What is that sensation like to be held by the solid ground? With your next breath, keeping your eyes closed, I invite you to begin to visualize a place that feels really safe to you. This can be a real place or an imaginary place. I have an imaginary place in my mind that involves trees, and it's like in a forest under a really beautiful tree that no one knows about. And it's just kind of my space, my safe haven, where I just get to go to. And it's just me and the birds and this beautiful, beautiful tree that's almost has canopies, and it just feels almost like a house. Of course, your safe space can be whatever it is that you want it to be for you. It could be a real place, it could be a room, it could be, or an imaginary place. So take a moment and just imagine a safe space. See if you can really visualize the details that go into the place. How does it feel like to be there? How does it smell like? What sounds are in this place, this space? And as you visualize yourself sitting in this beautiful, safe space that you know is your place, I want you to begin to bring to mind that thing that causes you some suffering at this point in your life. can be something small, but really feel the suffering just for a moment that it's causing you. It's okay, it's safe. We're only going to do that for a moment. And with your next breath, I want you to imagine for a moment that you are holding this thing in your left hand, almost as a way to indicate that while the suffering is real and valid, it's not your whole experience of life. And see if you can breathe right now as if you are calm as you bring the suffering into your conscious attention. This, in and of itself, if you're able to do that, is a radical act of equanimity, attending to the source of the suffering and yet retaining some bit of calm. It's a radical act of psychological maturity. So let's just stay there for just a moment, realizing that this suffering is not us. It's not our entire experience. It's just part of us. And we can hold it even tenderly in our hand. And with the next breath, we're going to delve into the first step of the self-compassion practice, which is really giving ourselves self-kindness, intentions of self-kindness, treating ourselves with self-kindness. And one way to do this is to address yourself with endearment. Like, for example, you could say to yourself, hey, sweetie, this is a moment of suffering. Sweetie, this is hard. Or honey, or hey, this is difficult. If you're a guy listening to this and sweetie and honey is a little too hard for you, you can go, dude. Dude. This is hard. It's a moment of suffering. It's hard. And as you address yourself in this way, simply sit and see how it feels. Maybe it feels really warm and nice. Maybe it feels a little awkward, and it's all okay. But really see if you can make a choice right now to be there for yourself. Sweetie, this is a moment of suffering, but guess what? I am not freaking leaving you. I am not leaving you. We're going to get through this together. Even though this is hard, we're going to get through this together, sweetie. You're not alone. I am not leaving. You're too important to me. I love you too much. Not because of what you do, simply because you are. I'm not leaving. And with your next breath, I want you to imagine for a moment that there's almost a clone that comes out of your body, and it's you. And you're sitting right next to yourself, right next to you. And I want you to imagine that clone just giving you a huge, massive hug. I'm not leaving you. yeah, this is a moment of suffering, but I'm not leaving you. And imagine that clone just making that intention to stay next to you and love you up, even if it's hard. And with your next breath, I want you to see if you can take just a moment and notice in your body, is there any place in your body where you might be feeling some tension because of this suffering that you experience? For me, a lot of times it's in the chest, a lot of times it's in the throat also. And so, just for a moment, can you take your hand, either one of your hands, and if you put that thing of suffering in your left hand, let it go and use your left hand, or you can use your right hand, and just see if you can touch that part of your body with warmth, with compassion. Because we're mammals, we're able to do that. Reptiles are not able to do that, but mammals are able to actually really touch others and with ourselves with warmth, and that actually bypasses our brain, so it helps us register on a somatic level that we're here for ourselves. And for the next few breaths, just see if you can repeat the word for that part of the body. Just soften. I'm here for you. I'm here, and you can soften. Go ahead and soften. Just for a little bit. Just for a little bit. I'm here. It's safe. You can relax. Soften. And as you take your next breath, you may choose to repeat the following phrases silently to yourself. If it's still true to you, you could say, I'm having a really hard time now. I'm struggling. And this is part of being human. It's part of being human. Right now, it might be part of being an educator who's needing to teach online. Might be a part of being a school leader who needs to lead their team remotely and not knowing how to do that. I'm having a really hard time. And this is part of being human. Maybe it's that I'm having a hard time in my relationship. May I be kind to myself in this moment, rather than harsh and judgmental. If I picked a fight with my partner at home, may I be kind with myself, not harsh or judgmental. If I'm harsh or judgmental, that's how I'm going to treat my partner. So may I be really kind to myself so that I can fully be there for my partner with that kindness as well. And the last sentence you can give yourself is, I'm worthy of receiving self-compassion. May I give myself the compassion I need always. I am worthy of receiving self-compassion. May I give myself that compassion whenever I need it. And take another deep breath in. And go ahead and breathe as you kind of let the ingredients of this practice blend together, and just notice, just for a moment, you can even keep your eyes closed, just notice without judgment how it feels to direct self-compassion towards yourself. And go ahead and take another deep breath in, and whenever you're ready, you may slowly, slowly open your eyes. Beautiful. So first, I just want to thank you for going through this with me. My invitation for you is to use this as much as you can in your life, especially during this time. Also want to remind you that I'm here for you. You can reach out. I also, like, we're here for one another, you know, if you want more connection and you want to connect with people, you can even put your info on the chat and we'll be there for you. I really believe in creating this community and being there for one another. Yeah, I love all the things that I'm seeing in the chat. Thank you, Tarn. Oh, it's so great that you're here. Thank you, Julie, for what you said. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Kate. And just know that I'm saying thank you to all of you. I can't, it's a little hard for me to read the chat and then be with you, but I just deeply, deeply appreciate you. I am really, really, really excited about Thursday. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have truly an exceptional guest speaker be with us. And she is all about radical self-care and just has so much amazing things to share. And it's going to be great. I'm sorry that today I did not get a chance to get you into small groups. I just want to be respectful of your time. But I'm definitely hopeful that on Thursday we'll be able to do that. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be at peace. I hope this was helpful. And let me go ahead and unmute everyone so we can at least say goodbye to one another. So wonderful to see you all. Unmute you all. Mindy, great to see you. Bye. Bye, Michelle. Thanks for being with us. Bye, Terry.
Bye.
Bye, Mindy.
Bye, Randy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye, Nicole. Oh, Nicole, thank you for the beautiful, Nicole, thank you for the beautiful letter and email. I so appreciate you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, thanks, Diane.
Bye, Margaret.
Thank you, Delia. Good to see you. Good to see you, Allison.
Hi, so good to see you.
Everybody.
Bye, Miko. Bye, Dave. Andrea, Terry, great to see you all. Yeah, we'll see you on Thursday. Okay. Take good care.
Bye.
Be well.
We'll see you Thursday.
See you then.
Bye.